Mr. Faury, thank you for joining us on CGTN. Let's start with President Macron's visit in China. What is your expectation of it?
Well, that's the first visit after this long period of COVID, so it's very nice to be back here. From an Airbus perspective, it's reconnecting with the many stakeholders here, having the opportunity to meet as well with the workforce and meeting with customers as the traffic is recovering and we are on the rise again. So it's very good to feel the energy and be back here.
In what areas do you think the state visit by President Macron will improve the economic ties between China and France?
Well, as Airbus, I'm very happy to speak about aviation, the recovery of the traffic and the connectivity between the different parts of the world, in my view, is very important. So we will be celebrating this connection between the countries, between Europe and China moving forward, but as well speaking about some businesses and increasing the production here in Tianjin for us, or in China, as we have many plants in China, but as well looking for orders moving forward, and also developing the sustainable aviation fuel activity, which is a way to decarbonize aviation as the aviation keeps growing.
How do you envision the prospects of China-Europe cooperation in industry, and what role do you see Airbus in playing in shaping this partnership forward?
I think Airbus is a very nice blueprint of what China and Europe can achieve together. We've been investing in China for a long period of time. Now with this second phase, with the production of wings, the equipping of the wings for the planes which are assembled here in China, we are present on most of our products with some production in China. We are buying from China, and this is therefore a cooperation that benefits both sides, and at the end that benefits to the public with the ability to fly. So it's a global partnership. Aviation is a very global business by nature, and that's one of the good examples of what the two parts of the world, the Chinese and the European stakeholders, can achieve together.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is also traveling with President Macron, and ahead of the visit she said European countries need to de-risk their relationship with China. As a representative of one of the largest European countries, do you agree with that assessment? How do you view this relationship?
Well, we are living in a global world that is a complex one, and that is living with a number of tensions and crises as well. So industrial companies have to look at those risks moving forward and try to organize their operations in a sustainable way. For us, one of the consequences, what we're doing is to produce in China for China. So we have a global system. We can deliver from any site to the rest of the world, but we are as well present where the market is present. And that's a way to organize our activities, to be sustainable based on what might happen, what can happen in the world. That's the way we look at the future.
How has Airbus been working with supply chains in China, and how do you see the resilience of China's supply chains?
Well, that's been quite amazing to see the resilience in spite of all the difficulties in the last 3 years in China, but also around the world. And we've managed to keep producing planes at a slower rate, but still producing planes during the pandemic, and then growing again. But it's fair to say that in the ramp-up that we are facing now, the supply chains are challenged. There are shortages of raw material, of labor, and educated labor, trained labor. A lot of people have left. We need to hire again and train, and it takes time, but also shortages of microelectronic components. So it's not easy for the supply chains to recover from that shock, and it takes more time to recover on the supply side than on the demand side. And therefore we see that tension is a problem for the speed of recovery. At Airbus last year, we were still not at the pre-pandemic level in terms of deliveries, and it will still take years to be back of where we were in 2019 because of the supply tensions.
Well, Airbus is managing a very complex global supply chains. How important are China's supply chains to your company's overall achievements?
It's a global supply chain, as you mentioned before. So we are sourcing from China for the rest of the world, and we are delivering from the rest of the world to China. It's a global ecosystem that has been maintained during the pandemic. We're trying to de-risk in the sense of localizing activities closer to the market, but it will remain a global supply chain that needs to be managed in this way. And therefore, our procurement teams are all around the world working with our suppliers.
What are some of the technological advancements to improve the efficiency of supply chains?
We're using digital to a very large extent. That gives us the ability to have access to more data, to understand better ahead of time what will happen, to anticipate. That's a very important part of the equation. And as well, working with more traditional ways of creating buffers and resilience to crises and shocks. We are in a world that is quite unpredictable, with fast changing situations, and we need to be able to adapt to those situations. So the earlier we know what's going to happen, the easier to react, but we need as well to be very fast.
In light of the growing emphasis on sustainability and green energy in China, how does Airbus align its priorities with China's zero carbon goals?
Well, the aviation as a whole has taken the objective to be carbon neutral by 2050. At Airbus, we took the lead very early in the process before the pandemic to decarbonize the aviation and our own activities. There are different steps. The first step is to deliver the current generation of planes because they burn by far less fuel and therefore less emissions. And on top, they're capable of 50% of sustainable aviation fuels. So we can start to use those fuels and decarbonize. We're preparing the next generation of planes that will again reduce the fuel burn by around 25%, and they will be capable of 100% of sustainable aviation fuels. So that's the way to go to 2050 with planes that will be fully decarbonized and economically viable with more expensive sustainable aviation fuels. And on the longer term, at Airbus, we have launched the development of the first hydrogen-powered plane for entry into service in 2035. So we have a full range of products to go to the decarbonized aviation of the future.
I look forward to it. Well, China is also pushing ahead in its renewable energy. How is the cooperation with China's renewable energy sector?
We are at the beginning of the ramp-up of sustainable aviation fuels. We are very happy to sign an agreement this week on the sustainable aviation fuel with the fuel provider here in China for all airports and companies, with the objective to contribute to the 10% of use of SAF by 2030. And that's what we would be targeting for China with this agreement.
What is your impression of Airbus' performance in China in the past 3 years? And as China relaxed its COVID policies, demand is going to pick up this year. And how important is China market to Airbus in years to come?
The Chinese market has always been important in the past years, including during the pandemic, in terms of deliveries of planes. But this has to be driven by the traffic. And the traffic is indeed recovering, as you said before. We will be coming to the 2019 traffic globally this year and probably in 2024 in Asia. So we have the pandemic behind us. Now the growth of the traffic is driven by the GDP and by the economy and by the appetite for flight. So we are happy to have to serve this market. And actually today the demand is higher than the capacity to supply, both for the traffic, for the passengers, for the airlines, but as well for Airbus. So we're really on the rise and trying to ramp up as fast as we can.
Let's talk a bit about the global economy. What do you think about the economic landscape and that are going to affect Airbus's business in the future? And how is Airbus preparing for possible risks of downturn and disruptions?
We are in a world of fast-changing situations, interdependencies in the world, and having a global business as aviation, we are trying to de-risk, as we discussed before. One way of de-risking is trying to be present in the different regions of the world, going from one final assembly line to a second final assembly line is also a way to have the ability to deliver from China to China and Asia and potentially the rest of the world as well. So we're trying to be resilient in different ways, in the way we source, in the way we produce, and in the way we serve the customers.
What do you think China and Europe should join efforts to work on to promote global economic stability and recovery?
Aviation is trying to take its share by recovering, by connecting the world. I absolutely believe that having people meeting face to face, knowing each other, is increasing the mutual understanding and the ability to prosper together, and this is mutually good for all parties. So aviation is an enabler of prosperity and peace and good understanding between the people. That's what we're trying to bring. That's our share.
What do you think about the impact of rising geopolitical tensions, and how is Airbus navigating through this unprecedented turbulence?
It creates more complexity for all businesses. That's the case as well for Airbus. We are a very global business by nature. We're connecting the world. We have presence in the US, in Europe, in Asia, and in particular in China, and that's why we're here this week. So we are trying to serve the markets as good as we can and being present close to the customers. But we're also looking at the evolution of the regulation, of expectations of the stakeholders, and indeed navigating, as you said, trying to satisfy the main stakeholders, but also serve the purpose of Airbus, which is, again, to connect people around the world.
And now you're at the helm of one of the largest multinational companies in the world. Do you see challenges for globalization? Do you think the principle of open market and free trade will be challenged in the future?
Indeed, we saw in the last years many hurdles, many challenges for globalization. The pandemic was one of them. There are others. The conflicts are one. There's a way to adapt to it. There's also a way to try to prevent them. And we believe aviation, space to some extent, and the business we are contributing to are helping to reduce the tensions, to have people knowing each other, better understanding each other, and cooperating rather than conflicting. So that's the part I like to support, which is the role that aviation plays for humankind.
And let's talk a bit about your vision for the future of the aviation industry, and what role do you see Airbus playing in shaping that future?
I believe aviation is a good for humanity, and it has to face the challenges of global warming, like many other industries. Aviation accounts for 2 to 2.5% of the carbon emissions of the world, and if we want to hand over aviation to the next generations, we have to decarbonize. So the biggest challenge for us is this decarbonization of aviation. It comes with digitalization, that is an enabler of competitiveness, of design, of production of the planes of the next generation. But again, we've put decarbonization as the top priority of the company, of the aviation sector. We are driving this with our products, technologies, also through cooperations, because we need to improve the products, the planes, but we also need to produce the fuels, the decarbonized fuels that will be used to fly in a decarbonized way in the future. And this is a broader challenge. This is a challenge where we need regulators, we need governments, we need airports, we need airlines, and we need the fuel producers. And we are trying to play the role of catalyst in organizing this and supporting this change from today, where we use mainly kerosene, therefore carbon-intensive fuels, to 2050, where we will need to use decarbonized energies and decarbonized planes.
What is the innovation strategy of Airbus, and how do you encourage innovation? And tell us about some potential technological advancements that could change the global aviation industry in the future.
Airbus has been pioneering aviation now for decades, with a spirit of innovation, of bringing to the market new technologies. We are partnering around the world with a lot of suppliers, of other companies, to always try to understand better what are the technologies that can drive progress. We started with the fly-by-wire on the single-aisle family that is now very popular. 3 decades ago, we've introduced carbon planes and a lot of new technologies to be lighter, to be more comfortable, to be more efficient, more competitive. And over the years, we've managed to fly in a very safe way. Aviation is now the safest way to travel on the planet. That's quite amazing when we know that we fly such a high altitude and high speed, also in a very comfortable way and in a very economical way. And the next challenge is indeed to do it in a sustainable way. That's the big transition we're organizing now with all the new technologies and the vibrant ecosystem on innovation around the world, and here in China as well.
As you are managing a very complex global supply chains, how do you ensure that the standard of safety be met globally?
Thank you for the question. Actually, safety is my chief priority. Flying passengers in a safe way is the first and primary objective that we have.
Even at a very high cost to ensure.
Indeed, it's expensive, but it's necessary. That's what the passengers are expecting today, and they're right to expect it. We have a global supply chain. We have sort of 3 million parts per plane. So indeed, it's a lot of complexity, and we're relying on standards that have been developed over the years and over the decades, and we're sticking to those standards very carefully. We're testing along the chain all what we are doing, and we keep improving the standards to make sure that as we ramp up the production, the volumes, as we see more people flying around the world, the level of safety keeps getting better. And just to give one figure, today there will be 5 million people taking off and landing on an Airbus plane in the world. So it's sort of 5 million people a day, and it shows the level of expectation that we need to have on safety to make sure that all those people can land at destination in a safe way.
Indeed, that comes with great responsibility.
Indeed.
What do you think about China's economic outlook? Has China relaxed COVID policies recently? Do you think the economy will pick up this year?
I want to be quite humble. I'm just back in China after 3 years not being in country, and I've been traveling here in China, spending time in Beijing and in Tianjin. But I find that the China I was used to, and a lot of activity, a lot of energy, a lot of drive for the future. So yeah, I'm very optimistic that things will keep improving, and people will be traveling again, and that the things will keep going better. That's what we are working for.
Well, China has reiterated its commitment to further opening up to the world and make high-quality use of foreign investments. What do you think about China's business environment?
We keep investing consistently with what we have done so far. That has been quite successful. We grow the capacity, especially for the single aisle. That is a very big success story for Airbus and for China here in country. And with the reopening of the world, the reopening of China to the world, we think that's the direction that we're right to believe in. So yeah, we are very optimistic for the future. I'm here to contribute to further investment in China. Airbus is investing, Airbus is growing in China. So we believe in the growth. We like the ability to do business here. We have a very good cooperation with several partners of the aviation sector that has been beneficial for Airbus, and we keep working in that spirit of a good cooperation with our partners here in China.
How is the partnership with China's airliners and customers?
We have customers in China in the form of airlines, lessors as well. They are looking at the recovery of the traffic as something positive. After difficult years, they are starting to invest again, reviewing their fleet planning and looking at the number of planes and the type of planes they need to acquire to be competitive moving forward, to serve the demand. And that's why we're here, and we are very happy to serve that demand.
And I know Airbus has an R&D center in China. How is the technological cooperation with China going?
Right. Actually, we are growing our capabilities in R&D, in production, in the ability to source sustainable aviation fuels to go decarbonized, also on the end of life of the product. So we are covering the full spectrum of activities and investing, because the Chinese market, the aviation market, is on the rise, and the plan is to double very quickly, so we need to serve, and Airbus is bringing its share to contribute to this doubling of the market in the next years.
Mm-hmm. And what is your view of China's jet producing industry domestically?
Airbus is producing planes domestically. Actually, we have just delivered the 600th plane manufactured in Tianjin for an Airbus fleet in China that is slightly north of 2,000 planes. So it means that 30% of the Airbus planes which are flying here in China have been manufactured in China, in Tianjin. So that speaks for the strength of the investment that Airbus made over the years, and of the quality of the workforce, of the support of the partners to make this happen. 30% of the Airbus fleet flying in China has been manufactured in China.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.